Oh, I
that
see.
first. Hold on for a second. I'm always a bit afraid of it running out of storage or something. That's all.
Mine wouldn't.
Yeah.
Mine wouldn't go 3 minutes. Be
Yeah.
done for.
But Brian, I think it's sort of funny that you're here at my clinic, because I was thinking I should be at your clinic.
Oh, for crying out loud! No, I don't see how.
Well, when I was looking on your website because Haley told me you were coming, and I never realised like Ray Hunt was sort of a foundation of the way I thought about training dogs, and you got to work with him and with Tom Dorrance, and I heard about these guys, I'd say 25 years ago, and they had an influence over me and how I do it. What was it like? What were those boys like? Can you tell me a bit about them? Because I know they're not around anymore. Like.
Well, all three of them, of course, have different personalities. And I first worked with Bill, and you know, you were talking yesterday about seeking out the best. All I did was I met his boys in high school, and he lived right over the fence. Well, it's a mile or two between houses, but he was my neighbor, and he was at a point in his life where he was wanting to share with somebody, and I really was wanting to learn. And he's the kindest, most sincere person that I can ever remember being around, and he just really tried to help me a lot. And I think back on that, and I could not have been with a better person if I could have picked anybody that I've known since in the world. I mean, it's just perfect, just perfect.
Just a privilege, really.
Big time. And I didn't even realize it. I didn't even know he knew anything about horses. I just thought it was a rancher up the canyon. And then Ray Hunt, he was real busy with a bunch of projects and asked me. I knew him through Bill.
Yeah.
And that was fun. And together we took care of a bunch of cattle. And
how big was the bunch? I heard you talking about some big numbers.
well, this where we were, we had 4,000 head of heifers for somebody else. They belonged to somebody else. And we incorporated our colts in with the doctoring and all that stuff.
Yes.
It was just kind of a part. I lived with the cattle, and he, after a while, and he went back and forth. I worked for Ray 4 different times, and both those guys, they talked about Tom all the time. And Tom is a younger brother to Bill, and it worked out where I got a job with him. We both had a job for somebody else starting, but we had 19 colts from a ranch in Nevada, and that was really good.
And that was with Tom?
With Tom, yeah. That was in Hollister, California. I don't want to take anything away from Ray or Bill, but both of them, the whole time I was growing up with them, they just talked about Tom helped me with this and that and that. He's kind of the real smart fella, and so it got to I had an opportunity to work with him and starting these colts, and they were right. I've never met anybody like that.
So it's
in
just
my
you
life.
and him working on these colts?
Yeah.
Oh, that was nice.
And the fella had a ranch and cattle, and so we doctored and took care of the cattle and sorted them and did all kinds of things with the colts.
So that was nice.
Fun.
You were working, you were getting stuff done, and you're also doing the colts, and you're also talking and spending time together all day.
Which is super important. After getting to know Bill and Ray, I wanted to be a cowboy, and that helped me a lot. I stayed with Ray one winter, and then he got me a job in Nevada on Big Ranch, and it changed everything, because now I have a perspective about why are we doing that? Why does this horse need this tool? After working on a big outfit, this was big. This was 14,000 pairs.
Pairs?
Yeah, it is a big. So now I'm starting to use the tools that they help me with. So it meant so much more.
Yes.
I mean, why do you even need this or that? And I found out pretty quick. So every bunch, I'm thinking, if I'm using the colts, every bunch I'm thinking more, what tools, I mean, more than get by, what tools am I going to have here pretty soon on this horse, and try to get them in earlier and earlier. That was really fun.
You told me a story there last night about you were doing a clinic with Tom, and how he sort of even caught you off guard when he was
I
introducing
know
the
it.
thing to people.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, the the deal was we were doing this clinic together. Somebody set it up, and we had sound together, but mostly that was so we could communicate with each other. And then he talked to the people. But as we were starting, I was just trying to be his arms and legs, pretty much. He was in an easy chair under a big umbrella, but and it's so
What
good.
age was he that time?
Early '80s.
Oh wow.
I remember him saying, he was telling me, he says, people ask me, do I still ride? And he says, I tell them, if I didn't get enough riding in the first 80 years, it's a little late now. But anyway, what he said was, and so he talking mostly to the people and me, and then I pretty much was just talking to him. We were both on the speaker, but anyway, so he said, he's kind of adjusting the sound. Can you people back there hear me and all this stuff? And he says, okay, sure, thank you people for coming, pretty day and everything. And now, if there's anybody here that's come here thinking they're going to learn something, perhaps before we get started here would be a good time for you to load up your horse and go home. And even I was like, I mean, you could have heard everybody just, I couldn't believe my ears. And he says, because if any learning takes place, it is not going to be here. It's going to be at home when you begin to practice what you've been exposed to here. And that's just quite true. The very first time that I got with him in a educational sense, I remember he told me, you need to realize I can't teach you anything. And my heart just sunk. I thought, I'm so sorry that it's that. But he went on to say, I can't teach you anything, but I'm going to do everything I can to help you learn. And at that time, it seemed like a contradiction. I didn't understand that, but that's true. You know, all a clinic is something to get you thinking a certain way. It's up to you after that.
That's what I was going to ask you next is, so you've done the clinics with Tom, you do a lot of clinics yourself with the horses, and we're here at the dog clinic. And so if you could say something to the people here at the dog clinic, if you could give them a little bit of advice or a tip, or how to use a clinic, how do you use it? How do you suck the most out of a clinic that you can for yourself?
Well, if it's, you know, I've been to several dog clinics and they don't even match, but they're successful people. I mean, but one fellow will have a different twist on something, and it all to arrive at the same goal, you know. But for myself, I take notes. And I got half a dozen dogs at home. Like, it would be hard if you just had one dog for me, because I want to grow. And so I keep the dogs moving. But, well, with me anyway, I watch every dog. And I brought some dogs, but I could have been fine as a spectator. Sometimes the dogs can interfere with what else is going on. You get focused on your own dog. But I just make believe. I watch every dog, and their interact, how they fit with the person, and then I'm trying to predict ahead of time, what are you going to say to this person? First, let me recognize what help this dog could benefit from. What's he need? And then I'm trying to predict, what would I do if it was my clinic?
Yes.
And see how close I come to what you offer to the people.
Yes.
And that's more of a learning. Not so much at the dog deals, but in the horse deals, there's an element of the people that have come there to visit, not to learn. It's a social thing.
And that's okay if that's what it is.
If the check clears.
Yeah. But and then the other thing is, like you said there, I often say, you know, doctors differ and patients die.
Yeah.
And then, you know, every cripple has his own way of walking. So there's 10 ways to do it, or there's 20 ways to do it. And what they hear here from me could contradict a little bit what they hear somewhere else.
Yeah.
And what do you say to people? Like, I always say, find somebody that you like, that has what you want, and try and stick with them a little bit. What do you say to people about that? Or go to lots of clinics and pick out different stuff? Or
see, I mean, I've got exposed to you the last couple of days, and I'm writing notes constantly and pondering, thinking about it in bed and all that, and I'm just wishing that you weren't going back to Ireland. I kind of wish you lived next door, so I could benefit from you more often till I get in a way of thinking where I'm not like, oh, what am I going to do here or there? Or, I want to get to where I have a better idea of what's going to work.
Yes.
It's working for you. That's all I need to know.
Yes, yes. I was sort of thinking the same thing. I was thinking, I'd love now if me and you had to drive to Canada or somewhere.
Yeah.
I'd love sitting up in the passenger side with you talking to you and hearing
That
all
would
this
be
stuff
fun.
and drawing all this information and ideas. And like that, I said, you know, I might need to call you in a week or a month or 6 months because something we said, you know, it might start to ruminate around in here for a while. I might have a question.
Well, it would be fun. I might, the same with you. I kind of get to thinking that I hate to bother. You know, there might be 20 other people that want to call you, and you might get sick of it pretty quick. I don't know.
Well, I'm sort of selfish, and like a horse buddy of mine said, he said, if I want to know something, he said, I'll find the best fella in the world and I'll go and ring him. And if he won't talk to me, I'll talk to the next best fella.
Well, see, I was just born into that.
Yeah.
I just told you, I don't know who in my life I've been thinking who would be better than Bill Dorrance. I was totally, I mean, my family had horses and cattle and I used them, but I mean, I was greener than green. And for somebody at his level to come down to my level and never be impatient with me and never, it just totally, that must be kind of hard. But if you ever knew Bill, I went to the snaffle bit fraternity in the West. That's a big thing, and it pay $100,000 for this. And I just meet Bill there and go to it, and here's the guy. Here's people that are on the top. They stop and visit with Bill and ask his advice.
Yes.
And he's helping me too. And I've been with him at the fair, and he would walk with a cane and he look out across the parking lot. What do you suppose going on over there, Bryan? And I said, looks like somebody's trying to get a horse loaded. Well, we ought to saunter over there. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do here? And he would go up, he's super tactful. But
yes, you'd have to be tactful too.
Oh,
some fella wouldn't want to.
It's not like I'll show you how to do it. It was, he stood around there, how you people doing today? And he says, oh, we're having trouble loading this horse. Yeah, and he'd watch a while, and then he'd say, I used to have trouble loading horses, and a fella showed me something that really helped me a lot. And they're like, oh yeah, what? Well, can I borrow him for a little bit? And he gets him loaded in and out, and well, anyway, you people have a good day, and just drift off. And
oh, that is lovely.
you know, he had a voice kind of like this, like, yeah, fella, and he kind of fella showed me something one time that helped, and a very odd voice. And he was telling me, he said, yeah, I got kind of an unusual voice. And he says, when I was in Oregon, in a ranching community, they picked me to be the Santa Claus. And he said, and he had to he's a real slender guy, but they put pillows in his belly and all that. And he says, a beard and everything. And he said, on cue, they wanted me to jingle these bells. And then everybody's like, what's this? And they opened the door, there's Santa Claus. So he said, they give me this sack of candy canes, and I was supposed to give them out to the kids. And he said, when I come through the door, these kids are like stunned, like he's here, Santa's here. And he said, they're just like in awe. And he says, I didn't know what to do. He said, I reached in the sack, and he says, how about some of you fellas, could you use a candy cane? And he said, they both looked at him, and one guy just leaned over to his friend, and he says, Santa Claus got a voice just like Bill Dorrance.
Oh, that's deadly.
He had a real unique voice. Really, really, really fun people, and a really good sense of humor.
A dry sense of humor.
I mean, I especially with Tom, with any of them, I knew their other older brother too, Jim, but I just felt like I was in the presence of real brilliance.
Yes.
And in Tom's case, I have no idea who is a genius and who isn't. I don't know. But if I was ever in the presence of a genius, I always thought, this is it right here, because I never seen anybody smarter than this. And very, very, he could fit in with the guy that owns the bank, or he would be down there playing with some little kid.
Yeah.
That's the way Bill was too. They had no, they didn't put anybody any more important over anybody else. It seemed like just the down to earth, good people.
Well, you sort of remind me there, my Welsh friend there, Pen Macdo, and he achieved a lot in his life with sheepdogs and all. But a couple of years ago, I was walking around the International with him, and people would be coming up to him and all, and making a fuss, and he, be like nothing with him, like. But I often wonder with those guys, did they move on from training the dog or the horse to training the man? Then, like I wonder, did they get a little bit of a bit of a pleasure or satisfaction out of seeing a fella picking up stuff?
I think a challenge.
Yeah.
I asked Tom. We took a road trip one time from California up to mid California up to Northern California and back, and we were talking pretty nearly nonstop. And he might have been 82 or 3 or something. And I said, "Do you feel?" It was a stupid question, really. I said, "Do you still feel like you're growing, even though you've committed not to ride a horse anymore?" And he was like, "Oh, why, sure." And I thought that was a stupid question, because in working with people, you don't see two people that are the same. You don't see two horses the same. So he's fishing around for the right strategy to benefit this horse through this person.
Yes.
And it's fun.
Probably thinking more than if he was riding, like.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. And he's a guy too that got me thinking about pondering, going on a road trip with the radio off, or laying in bed by yourself on a Sunday morning. And he told me, and it's very true, a lot of the revelations a person can have are without, we didn't talk too much about dogs, and I wish I could, because he was so smart. But we were talking mostly about the horses, where the answer comes when you don't have a horse within 100 miles of you, and by pondering, he what would be the word? What everybody else did in the country had no bearing on what he did. It didn't. That's why he would invent all kinds of ideas and things, and it didn't matter what everybody else is doing. That just didn't even.
Well, see, we were talking last night, and you were telling stories there about roping bears and all kind of stuff. And I wanted to go to the toilet to pee, but I couldn't go because didn't want to miss any of the stories. But I enjoyed the ones where you were telling me about how you saw 2 ducks flying out of the thing, and 3,000 cattle started to turn back on you like dominoes. But what I liked was the way you thought, I wonder if I could put something on the dog, or I could do something with the dog to create that same effect.
Yeah.
And see, that's the sort of thinking, that's the kind of thing that makes me lie awake at night, is when I meet guys like you, and a few people have done it to me, and it's get the cogs turning.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't matter if you've never heard of anybody doing this before. Like, I'm thinking, how could I? Well, I was telling you about taking a short stock whip and putting a long I did a lot of experimenting before I found out this was to move big bunches of cattle, but you could whip that right toward this hind leg and crack it, and it could make a big difference on a big bunch of cattle. Most people don't care; they're never going to see a big bunch of cattle, but that's what we were doing day in and day out. So it was so fun. And my crewmates, I told them, they said, "What do you got here?" And I told them, I call it duck on a stick, because those ducks, 2 ducks affected 3,000 head of steers in, I don't know how long it would take, 30 seconds.
They ruined an afternoon in a second, eh?
Yeah. I mean, we were pointed 3,000 head of steers. If you've never done it, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But when you get them lined out to drive, like where they're on the trail and they're broke to kind of go and they're not trying to eat and everything, and it's all downhill kind of. And it takes 2 or 3 days a lot of times to get them in the travel mode, And 3,000, these 2 ducks flew out of the ditch. I was in the lead, but not quite in the lead. I didn't need to be quite in the lead. But the duck flew up and the leaders just spun around, and I could see going through like domino, and the fence wasn't too far from me. And I thought, if I could break that, I've run my horse down there, and I got there just late, and I sit and watched 3,000 head of steers going north, turning south.
Yes.
And it cost us a couple hours.
Yeah.
And I thought, if 2 ducks could affect 3,000 head of steers, maybe I could. So I come up with crazy ideas, and roping bears and all that. A lot of that was just stupid. it was my ignorance. I mean, I could have got killed or
Well, that
not
youth,
smart.
isn't it? Like you're
Yeah,
experimenting. I wonder if I
right.
could, like. But I was watching. Me and my brother were sitting watching that that little documentary with Monty Roberts years ago back in Ireland, and we were looking at him with the Mustangs and whatever he does his business. But the idea that he gave us was the way he was with his body language and all. So me and my brother were saying, I wonder could that work with sheep when we go into the shedding ring? Could we start looking them in the eye and changing our body language and then taking the pressure back off? And could we get them to open up and all this? So I started doing that, and I was at a trial in the Isle of Man back in 2000 or maybe 99, somewhere around there, and an English guy, Alf Kime, saw me working my dog and all. He wanted to buy my dog, but he came over to me after and he was trying to buy my dog, and he said, I was watching you in the shedding ring. He says, now I don't know what you were doing, but I was watching you and you were doing something. But it's funny how small the world
Now
gets.
I want to buy your dog.
Well, he wanted to buy the dog, and I always sell dogs, but I told this fella before, I said I'm keeping him. But I said my buddy Norman has a half brother, and so Norman sold him the dog, and then he had the dog for a while. But the dog ended up with Haley's mother.
I see.
I just think it's incredible how.
Yeah.
And now here I am standing with you 20 years later.
Yeah.
And but it's the same idea there. You see something, and it mightn't even be what you see, might even be incorrect. But when it puts that out idea in your head, like you with your two ducks, you can get ideas anywhere, like, can't you?
Oh,
to
it's
experiment,
fun.
like.
Yeah, if you can, like Tom was kind of an inventor, or a inventor.
Yes.
And he had all kinds of stuff. And when he come on the ranch where I was, there was gates that drug, and there was things messed up around, and Tom could tinker around on a Sunday morning and have some gizmo going to where you could open a chute like to a run up. I don't know what it was, but he'd do it a horseback. He took an old car rim and had a rope going around it, and had it where he could ride up there and pull this rope, and it would open a gate 20 yards ahead. I've never seen anything like that.
Yes.
And you'd think he would patent it or something, but he's a guy that had no interest whatsoever in money he had to live, or fame or anything like that. I was at his house one time. See, Ray Hunt brought public awareness about Tom. He's just a simple guy that.
He brought the publicity to it.
If there was a group like we had over there eating lunch and lots of people, you would never know that he ever rode a horse. You'd think, who's this? Somebody's uncle or what's he? Very low key that way. And I was at his house one time, and Ray Hunt had brought this awareness to Tom Dorrance, and he started kind of getting out a little bit and doing things and helping people. And People Magazine is a magazine in America, and he was featured in there. And we were in his living room one time, and the phone rang for probably the fourth time in the last half an hour. You could tell his wife was getting real tired of hearing the phone ring, and she said, Tom, telephone. He kind of heaved a sigh and looked down, and he said, my life was so much happier when nobody knew who Tom Dorrance was.
Brilliant.
And see that you have people all over you see that they would kill for fame. I mean, anything. And he shunned it. He had no interest in that.
Well, I find it interesting because Haley reminds me of that. And I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm always selling a little bit. But I want to, because we need to go and get this out clinic on, I want to ask you one other thing there. What do you think with horses and with dogs? Because what do you think about being afraid to make a mistake? Or is it all right to make a mistake? Or are you better to experiment? Or I hear people saying, I've got this dog and he's a bit too good for me and I don't want to do that because...
Fear of failure has cost people a lot of progress, really. And I remember when I was just, we'd both worked for, my cousin and I worked for Ray Hunt on a ranch, and Joe Walter is another friend of mine that I introduced him to Ray and worked together, and then we got to riding colts together and learning. And my cousin was running a ranch, and we lived nearby, and he helped us ship cattle, load cattle on the truck. And we were riding a couple colts up and down the alley bringing these cattle, and I remember my cousin sat down on the load and chute, and he said, I wished I would have rode colts like you guys did with Ray. And I said, well, how old are you? 25? I said, I don't think it's too late. And I said, just go for it. And he said, you know what? I would just be afraid of screwing one up. And Joe and I just busted out laughing. He said, what's so funny about that? And both of us are like, if you can get through this without screwing something up, that'd be like, it should be on Unsolved Mysteries. Like that's part of the deal. I mean, you're going to do a bunch of stuff that you're not too proud of, and that you realize later that was just totally stupid. But that's all part of your education. I never heard of anybody. Tom, I mean, in those road trips with Tom, I mean, well, the minimum, he had 3 brothers that were older than him that started horses, big bunches for people around. And so he learned a lot about what not to do, and why he's a very, very observant person. And so him less than most people make mistakes, but that's part of the deal. If you've never bucked off, then you probably haven't rode too many. If you've never been kicked, you probably had, you can't, I mean, how would you read the signs of what it means just before you get kicked?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I remember my youngest son got kicked below the knee. He was 11 and broke both bones, broke his leg. And Tom was talking to him, and he says, so how old are you? And he says, I'm 11. And he said, when I was about your age, I had a mule one time told me that he might kick me, but I didn't listen. And he said, I was pretty lame for a week or two. And he says, my guess is that you're going to go the rest of your life without having a horse kick you and break your leg. Now, somebody could warn you, but until it really happens, until you've doctored a swollen leg or broke one, he broke it.
Like I was saying to you yesterday, I learn best when it hurts the most.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But we'll finish on this now, because people be getting a bit impatient. Let's get this clinic started. But you told me about that cartoon that your wife put out on paper. Tell me that one there.
There was the mother and a little girl coming out of the toy store, and the little girl's packing a Barbie set, and she looks up at her mother and she says, you know, Mom, for a minute there, when you said for the last time no, I almost thought you meant it.
Yeah, we'll finish it on that note. I like that one. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Listen, it's been a privilege to meet you.
Oh, same here.
Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, I just, the only thing I don't like about you is you live too far away.
Thanks, mister.